The topic for this video is inspired by kind of exchange you and I have had over the past, I don't know, week or two, I would say. I wouldn't call it an argument, but I would say it's some friction. And I thought the friction actually was a good point of demarcation between pre-fi life and post-fi life. You and I were going to have this conversation. We had an email exchange and, you know, a couple of back and forths, and we finally resolved to just say, hey, this is probably best talked about face-to-face. I've felt this tug recently between, you know, things that are competing for my time and what I need to be doing in a pre-fi life. And I can see that you're having that same conflict on the other side of fi. So, you know, you reached financial independence in 2020. I'm hopefully going to reach my financial independence number in 2024, probably more likely 2025. And those two sides of fi have very different needs. So I don't know. Do you want to set this up a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess the way, you know, from the beginning of this project, I've always had at least this, you know, kind of background or guiding thought that, you know, I need to try to be as responsive as I can to what you and I need to get done for this show, because let's just look at the balance sheet. I should have a lot more free time than you do. You keep incredibly busy with your architecture business, which encompasses a whole host of things and passive income streams that are sometimes rather active versus passive. Plus the fact that, let's face it, you do the overwhelming majority of editing for the show. You're the design professional. You're really experienced, and frankly, you just do a hell of a lot better job at it. So, you know, when it comes to my tasks for the show, a lot of the background stuff that most people don't think about, you and I certainly do. I try to be really responsive and reactive when you put out videos for me to review and things like that. So it's always been there. But on the same note, there's still been these times where, you know, I wouldn't say butt heads. I would say, you know, friction. I love that you came up with that. I think you do have a future in marketing if you want to go that way.
My whole business is marketing, man.
Yeah, I guess it is. I was thinking of, you know, traditional marketing for these, you know, corporate entities that always have to put spin on stuff. I suspect you spin a lot less. But anyway, you know, so there's been a couple times recently where, you know, you and I were having text exchanges or emails when something a little longer was needed. Yeah. Since I'm prone to send really long texts about, you know, sort of relative effort and what's worth spending our time on, and, you know, what's the best use of things I can contribute to the show versus things that just seem fun for me, and I do believe will help us, but maybe from your, you know, kind of experience in the space aren't going to move the needle as much. And so that is kind of how I would describe in kind of amorphous terms what you and I have been talking about lately. Is that kind of accurate, or what would you add to that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think this probably applies to a lot of people in the FI movement, that you're very driven in your career. You're goal oriented, and you're used to controlling things. I mean, you came from a VP role in a biotech company. Like that, you were in charge of hundreds of people. I don't know, maybe it was thousands, but it was at least hundreds, right? And you're used to calling the shots. And I've been running my business now for 10 years. And I mean, you know, architects are just control freaks anyway. We want to defer to each other in a lot of ways. And I think we want to appreciate the strengths that we each bring to this project. But sometimes that can be really hard. You know, when you have, and I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes if you feel like, hey, I've deferred on the past three things, it's time for me to get something out of this that I need. And, you know, I might prioritize something over and above what you do, you know, graphics or, you know, visual style or some thing that you say, I don't care, you know, but it's really important to me. And, and so I think there's that dynamic, but also, you know, when you and I started this, it was just, we were just having a conversation as friends, and there's like no pressure. Right. But then when it starts to gain momentum and you start seeing it, you know, how it's impacting other people in the world, that can't help but affect the art that you're making. That's the way I see it, you know, and I've experienced this in my own business YouTube channel. Like at some point you don't want to become like who your audience wants you to be. You just want the conversation to flow and be natural and just be the exchange that it always was. And so there's all these kind of competing things here, Jay. And I'm realizing that for this project, we need different things out of it. And sometimes those different things, they intersect in this space of like, I feel like it's maybe asking more of me, and you feel like it's asking more of you, and making different demands of your time. And it's interesting to me that the two sides of FI, like my time has to go toward getting me closer to my goal. That's the way I see it.
Totally.
And for you, you get to choose. And so for you, it's a completely different calculus. Like you're taking free time away from family or other fun activities that you could be doing, research projects. I don't know what that is, but, and so if it starts to feel tedious for you, what's the point? Right. And that's the thing that I'm worried about in this whole exchange that we had recently.
Yeah, and I love the way you summed up the latter part. And I think it just sort of speaks to how in tune you are, observant and high EQ. Looking at me, because this is something that anybody who crosses the retire early line is going to have to deal with, and that's this idea of your time availability and priorities may be rather different than the other people in your life,
right?
As well as different from what they were before you cross that line. And I think it's one of those things you can't truly prepare yourself for, because, while I'll go on record and say that I never have looked forward to our generally weekly conversations that we film here as anything other than exciting and interesting and fun. Like, they don't seem tedious. Yeah, sure. There may be weeks where I don't want to set up my equipment because I don't have a studio. It's literally in the middle of my upstairs, living space. But that's always been the great part. But then it's, sometimes there's these other chores, like when we, want to run experiments and do cut down videos and research new topics and, troll Reddit for ideas or things that people are struggling with in fire. There's times where I'm like, I'd rather go do something else.
Right.
But I've made this commitment to this idea you and I care about, and that just originated on a phone call, several years ago now. And so, but the struggle is that I know how much, we both care about this and how much effort you put into it. And so it can be challenging to try to reconcile all those things because, I should have all the time in the world available to do this stuff. And in some respects I do, but there's a lot of other things competing for that time, or even just ideas, headspace competing for that time. And so being sensitive to all of the above can be a little weird sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, some of what brought this up to the surface was we started this as a YouTube channel and we piggybacked the podcast on the back of it. And the thinking there was, we're small in the FI space. We want to be able to be searchable and discoverable via YouTube and Google. And so that seemed to make a lot of sense. Right. And so that's kind of like the core project. I think for you, one of the things you started to realize that you were getting out of this, as opposed to even when you were posting on your own blog, was you started getting community engagement and comments. And in this last exchange that you and I had, you were basically like, look, I get so much out of this community interaction. And it's probably filling one of those holes that when you stepped away from the workplace, that you lose a friend group there. And you feel like now you're contributing to something positive here, and you're able to take on all of the comments, which I can't handle. I have such a hard time with it. And that's in part rooted in my own YouTube channel, which I've bootstrapped and created from the start and managed myself, where, when it gets to a certain scale, you're just getting all kinds of hate. And I find that really difficult to deal with. And you agreed in this project to take all of that on, because it is that occupies mental headspace for me, but I just can't manage it. And so as the community started to grow, you started to look for other ways to build community. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I think everything you said there is accurate. And the one thing I don't have that you just described is this past of building another channel from being very small to quite large, right? You're over 1 million subscribers on 30 by 40 now. So you built up a certain set of reactions and practices and just ideas about community engagement. And unfortunately, the law of large numbers says that you're going to start to get, the little irritating things are going to rise way above sort of ground state once the numbers get that big. It's not something we really have to deal with on our show. It happens occasionally, and sometimes it's pretty terrible. And, those people we send packing. But I did agree to take on that stuff. And you're right. I do get a lot of engagement and positive reinforcement and just energy out of talking to people on the path. And it feels great to get that feedback. And it's one of the things Lori and I talk about probably the most. And maybe you and I don't talk about that part nearly enough. And that is when by her observation, she's like, well, why are you spending so much time on the show?
Right.
And it just all gets lumped into the show, even though the filming part is so small and the reviewing, the videos is small, but it's the YouTube comments and some of the other newer things that we started to do that I'm going to get to, where it feels like to her, like, whoa, I'm concerned, maybe it's too much. But for me, it's like, I enjoy this. This is something I can do in between other tasks or activities. And so that kind of idea has grown over time. And as you know, I've been looking to other ways to stay engaged with our community, because while YouTube comments are great, and when people email the show, responding to them and pointing them to resources, really, I've been looking for something a little more active, and I've tried to find ways to do that. We had been asked a couple of times on Reddit in particular, hey, have you thought about doing a Discord for Two Sides of Phi? And so, you and I had some exchanges about that, and you seemed interested in doing the experiment, and so I put the server together, did a very kind of limited rollout to Reddit and our YouTube community page, and that has been a source of engagement recently, and just a couple weeks old now. But while I know from the start this is something that you just simply don't have the time to put into, given your the workload you have on your plate for our show, your business, etc. It's been something that's really motivating to me, and I know that this isn't a solved problem right now, because you and I have had some exchanges about, well, is that the best use of our shared time? Is it becoming more one side of Phi-ish if I'm the one that has the free time, if you will, post RE to engage with that community? And or maybe are there things I could be doing that would help the show more, that would be more active in engaging this YouTube community or producing other content for YouTube? And so I think that's been the most recent conversation you and I have had. And I don't know that we have resolved it per se. It's probably one of the reasons that it's good for us to talk about this today. But at least that's my thumbnail version of kind of what I think you and I have been touching on lately.
I'm fully supportive of things that give you and bring you energy. And I think it's now, I guess until we had this exchange, really, this back and forth by email and text, I didn't fully appreciate just how much that means to you. Because for me, a lot of this is about, I love connecting with a greater community and hearing input, but sometimes the input that I hear, it reduces clarity for me. It doesn't increase clarity. And I think for you, you see it as this source of energy and inspiration. And I have a harder time with that, because I feel like I have only just enough time to just, finish doing this edit. And then I go back to my business and I got to do an edit for my business. And so then I feel like sometimes these different side projects, experiments, whatever, feel like they're diluting what I think is the bigger mission. But maybe what I really need to hear from you is just that it's keeping you interested. It's like, because what I want is, this was set off in part because you said, hey, do you think I should, make a short about X or whatever? And, and I was like, well, yeah, that'd be great. But I thought in the past, you didn't like making shorts. You didn't like cutting down the videos, which was one of your jobs kind of early on that you assumed, and you tested it out. And you're like, at a certain point, you basically said, I don't like doing this. I'm not getting energy from this. It feels tedious. And then also, like, if you ran it by me, I would have like little tweaks that I'd want you to do. And you'd be like, I could tell, And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I hate thumbnails, and you hate my thumbnails. So
yeah. And
because they're garbage.
Honestly, but the thing is, and it's more than that. It's just what you're saying is like, I hate doing this. And if you're telling me I'm going to have to keep doing this, guess what? I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be involved in this project. And I think, we're both facing the tug of time. Like, what do we do with our time? How do we best use our time? And
I think you're right. And this is probably as much a post-RE reaction than anything else. Is I feel like I bought the freedom to spend my time on things that bring value to me, to the world, to my friends, to family, whoever it is. I think we both agree on priority number one, which is have engaging conversations that you and I both get something from, and that we hope and believe the broader community will get something from too. That's what feels the best. And that's my top priority for sure. And I enjoy that. But number two, I think we may differ on the next most important thing. And for you, I believe, opinion here, to make something that fits sort of your level of quality, and that you're creating something that looks and feels and sounds as good as it can, is personally very gratifying, irrespective of whether anyone else feels that about it. For you, that's vitally important. For me, the next priority is probably to receive feedback from our community, engage with them about that content, about what they liked, what they react to emotionally or otherwise, and helps me not only feel like we're doing good, get direct feedback that we are, but also help me understand, well, really, what is best for people? What do they respond? What do they find most useful? And how can we kind of feed off that and stay true to what you and I have here, but also create something that is going to build a nice community around, and really be just a source of information. On to the point you made, a stage in life that we feel is not adequately covered really anywhere, because even a lot of the post-RE people out there in the community, no knock on them, but they're still talking about how to get to FI. Yeah. It's mechanical, it's financial, and that stuff is so useful, but it's like this much of the picture, as I see it. And then, beyond that, the kind of third and fourth order priorities are, they dwindle pretty fast. But that's my opinion on kind of how I see each of our views on the top two. Where do you think it lies?
I think we're more in alignment. I would say priority number one, it's completely aligned there. Like to have interesting conversations that people care about listening to and that are helpful, painting a real picture of what it's like to be on each side of FI. To me, that's the guiding light. I don't expect you to contribute to the video end of this thing at all. If you want to dip into the shorts thing, I could almost see that as just being its own separate little project. Like if that looks like Jason, fine. Like I'm honestly completely fine with that. So I know that there's going to, if I'm not getting those things graphically or, brand wise out of this project, for me, I'm going to lose interest and not participate. And so I know I'm going to bake that in.
Makes sense.
So let's set that to the side. What I struggle with when I think about creating separate, disparate communities everywhere is I don't see myself finding the time to engage in, and for people who aren't familiar with Discord, it's a Slack-like interface. So there's a chat and there's a stream that you're kind of feeding into. Channels based on different topics. And you can interact with the people who are contributing to those channels. And it's hard for me, because I want to be able to contribute and I want to interact with people. And I've genuinely enjoyed, like, I've only been in there a few times, man, but it's nice.
No, I'd see it.
People they're nice, and I like
supportive.
that. Yeah. And it's cool. It's so hard for me to find the time there. And when I do get in there and I start having a conversation with somebody, I feel this mental weight of like, oh, I got to get back to that. Like and it feels like, and this isn't said disparagingly, but it feels like another task on my task list.
My operating principle in the beginning was, by no means does it require equivalent effort from the two of us. I don't want it to be fully one side, for sure, because I don't want to make one side a FI community. That's not my goal. But my thought, maybe it's overly optimistic, was, this place could be a positive outlet for you to dip into, maybe twice a week for 15 minutes, get the chance to get some positive feedback from the community, hear directly what they think and what kind of things they're struggling with, especially if it's in a space you're really good at, in terms of passive income generation, running your own business. It wouldn't be huge effort, but it would be a really great return on that time spent.
Let's say the roles were reversed and you were 2 years before your FI number. How would you have viewed recording these conversations and like this as a project?
Yeah. I think the first thing that I know is accurate reflection of how I think about the world is it would need to occur at a time where I really felt like I had the headspace to devote to it and could be present. Because for me, like after work, for example, like in my former life, I would not have been up for this. Like, yeah, I could like, lay on the couch and have a phone call with you, like at any time. It doesn't matter how tired I am. Like that'll still be fun.
You'd be asleep, but, like, dude. I know you'd just fall asleep.
No. I've never fallen asleep while talking to you.
Yes, you have.
While sober. But like to get this equipment out, to like, get it all ready, to convince my family to go somewhere else and not, interrupt me. Like that takes a certain amount of like effort and kind of mental like acuity. And I know I wouldn't be able to do that. So now we're talking about like, all right, maybe this is on the weekend. So now that's competing with family time and chores and other things I need to do. So for me, just for starters, just logistics wise, putting this together, if I'm still working, like you are now, I know that bar is so much higher. I know I would be excited about the idea, and having an excuse, something you and I have said several times in the 2 years we've done this show, having an excuse to sit down and have a conversation with you is great. Like, it forces us to have conversations we want to have anyway, but it schedules them. Yeah. So it makes sure that they happen. But I do know that I would be much more prone to this idea of, if this isn't feeling valuable, or it's feeling like I'm putting more effort into this than you are in this scenario, it would get at me too. And it would at least be something I'm thinking about, if not saying. That's for sure. I know that would be the case.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky to have my own space here, but all those things are true, man. It's just, it feels like everything is competing. And also in some ways, the closer you get to that magic number, the more precious it feels. And like, okay, well, I'm giving up a lot here. Like, I'm not going to be that person that really wants to work one more year. I want to head on into what's next. And, part of what's next might be a continuation of this. So, which is one of the reasons why I don't really want this to fade away, and I don't want you to lose energy for it, because, in spite of all those demands on my time, I do like what we've created. I mean, I love looking back at the catalog of just before we got on the show, just as a reminder, I went back to our first episode and I looked at that, your hair was a lot longer, and
it was.
you were in your bedroom recording, and I look on that with such fondness, man, because I think about how far both of us have come in that time period. And it's like looking back at photos of you and I shooting rockets off in your backyard in upstate New York. Like, it's the same kind
of 1986
nostalgia. It's like amazing, right? It's like,
it is.
I love seeing that, and I don't want that aspect of it to go away. And so sometimes it's kind of, I just need a reminder of the why. And I think for you, dipping into those communities, like, that's what it is. It's a reminder for you of why we are doing this project. And I genuinely was supportive of the idea of the Discord, because
you were.
I want that too. But now that it's there, I just can't figure out a way to engage in a way that feels like it's not taking more time. Like, this project just got a little bit bigger. There's like another thing over here,
Yeah.
There's kind of a funny gravitational pull between your side of Phi and this side of Phi, right? We're kind of walking this line of like, because I feel this, like, if I bring up something that's bothering me, I feel this, like, it may be received as like, well, this is just too much effort. Like, I don't need this. Like, I don't want there to be like and I don't think there is, but sometimes when it comes to a head, it feels like there's a little bit of drama, and that friction kind of builds maybe more than what either of us want it to be.
Human nature stuff.
Yeah. But I don't want that to, I guess that's why I say it's a weird gravitational kind of dance here. Like, we're orbiting around, like, you're like, well, I could just go over here and have fun and not deal with any of this. And so I want to be respectful of that too, man. And I really, I appreciate that you checked me in your own kind of way, in your passive aggressive way.
Well, and likewise, I guess I wouldn't call you passive aggressive. And I like to think Lori helped me get past my previous passive aggressive tendencies, but it's not perfect. I mean, I don't know, I guess a few thoughts come to mind. The first one being, you from the start said, like, this might be a really difficult project. Like, you self-identify as a control freak. I certainly self-identify as a control freak. But you also have this aspect of design sensibility, this being your career, you having had this experience over 10 years building your own social media presence and curating it by yourself, by the way. And I've seen the struggles you've had when you've had guests that don't deliver the way you want, or they, it just doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it just doesn't go the way you want because of things out of your control.
Yeah. Completely
out of your control. So, you've said from the start, we're going to rub up against that at times. And we have. And I've learned important things from that. So don't don't take that I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I've learned a few things along the way, but it also means that those will be points where, I have the biggest challenge. And I've never thought like, well, screw this, I just want to walk away from it. But, not being a design professional, and, getting feedback on a thumbnail that you asked me to do for shows I was doing, and it just not landing and like going back to the drawing board, like that's never going to feel good to me, whether it's you saying that or somebody else saying that, because it's like, I'm not good at this. I don't want to get better at this. I mean, I guess I do. I like being good at things like anybody, but it's like, that's the type of thing where I'd want to walk away from.
The whole model of school for architecture is based on critique. You sit for a crit every single day of your schooling, every single day. And critique becomes baked into who I am. And I realize that that's hard for other people to brush up against. Whereas I am just, it's part of my MO. It's just how I operate, man. Things don't get better if you don't critique them and continually improve them. And your lesson to me is like, doesn't have to be perfect. Look what we're doing. We're just doing a show about a conversation between friends. And I've taken that lesson from you.
I mean, it's a pretty fundamental observation you just made about the way you were trained and worked your entire career and continue to today versus mine. And not to say there's not tons of collaboration and challenge in science, right? There's a healthy dose of skepticism is required at every step in the scientific process. You know this well, you're married to a scientist, but it's different. And I had different levels of authority and increasing authority as I went throughout my career. And I was paid to have strong opinions and take enormous decisions by myself. And they were very weighty decisions, right? You lose your job and make the wrong one. But, and maybe that's as much about it as anything, as I don't handle the criticism as well as I need to. And that's what pushes me away from it. So not to make this a psychoanalyst session, but I think there's a lot to what you said. You made a great point early on in this chat, and that's about, we both have had a certain degree of autonomy in our professional lives that you still have and that I used to have. And so, both of us have strong opinions about how we want to do things, how we want to spend our time, and are used to being able to just take those decisions, with rare exception, right? You have clients, you can't, you could drop them, of course, but, and I had bosses, but still a lot of autonomy. Right. And so that is not going to get any weaker after you retire early. Because to your point, you're in control of your time, barring must-do things that, with your family in particular, or, with the government, like I got to pay taxes or things happen to me. But man, like more than ever, I do think hard about how I spend my time, just like you're doing.
I feel that.
For slightly different reasons, right? Yours, I want to get to this goal that I'm charging towards, and I am at that goal, and I want to control how my time is spent. So it's not that different, actually, these two sides, just the motivation and the way it hits us is different.
Yeah, and you're not motivated to find advertisers for the show because you don't need it.
No, and it's also really boring.
I get that. But can you see the conflict? Like for me, it's like,
I do.
Okay, well, are we going to start like a separate...
I do see the conflict.
A separate thing, which I know feeds you, but like, would we not take half the time and also dedicate it to finding sponsors? And like, I'm not forcing you to do this. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm not agreeing to do it myself either, but like, it's one possible path there, right? The fact that we record on 4:00 on a Tuesday, for me, this is a Saturday. This is a Saturday afternoon, I mean, because I'm working on weekends to make up for this time. And so it's just, I don't know.
The whole concept of the show is challenged by the fact that we are in such different positions.
Yeah.
Like what the show is the source of this friction at times. We are in different stages of our lives. And I want, like anything, to help you get to your goal. And obviously one easy way to do that would be if the show made gangbusters money, because it would just accelerate your path well beyond that extra penny that I give you every time we get a payout. That's not an even number. But in all seriousness, right, that I would want that. That would be an amazing outcome, right? How self-fulfilling would that be if the two sides of phi idea ended up pushing you to phi faster? That'd be great. But clearly at the present, it's not happening. We don't see a clear path to that, nor is it the reason why we do this.
Right.
And so we have friction because we have different amounts of time available, different headspace available, and different willingness to experiment and kind of create kind of a, things in orbit around the center merely because or primarily because we're in different places with respect to our phi goals.
Yeah. Like, you made it, man. You don't have to be here. You don't have to be sitting on that side of the camera. And
nope.
The fact is, neither do I. You don't. And if I didn't, I might make it to phi faster. I don't know. But it's
arguably you would, man. If you spent that 6 hours, I'm just picking a number, 6 hours a week, or 8. Let's make it 8 hours. Let's make it literally an extra work day.
Yeah, it probably is.
Hard to argue you couldn't put that time to something that could earn more, right? You would do an extra course than you do right now, or create additional downloads, digital downloads and tools like you do for 30 by 40. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe the message here is that we have these different ways we look at the world, these different motivations. We're in different stages of life. All of these, kind of things stack up on these two sides of phi, and it's what makes this work. We are looking at things from different perspectives. As much as we have in common, we have so many different motivators, realities, and just aspects of who we are.
And net worths, you jerk.
I mean, I don't think we're that far apart at this stage. You just gotta land the plane. You're almost there. Our phi goals are not terribly different.
I hate flying. I like landing.
I'm going to use as many plane analogies as I can in this episode because of how much you hate flying and how much you're probably already thinking about the fact that you're a month away from flying to California to visit me, which takes several flights to get here.
So many flights.
When we get here, we'll make it worth our while. But
you're not even going to be around when I land, man. You're going to be off at your little beer festival.
I mean, one of the biggest beer festivals, most important beer festivals in the country. So yeah, I'm sorry you won't be here for that, but you're
going to be slurring
by the
your
time
words
you
by
get
the time I get there.
By the time you get to my house, it should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, man. Are we going to share where we're going or what?
Nah, I think we will. Not yet. I mean, I've already written a title for that video, as you know. I have.
I remember it.
How this dinner got me kicked out of the fire movement.
Oh man! All right.
So stay tuned. We always deliver the best content at the end of the episode.
It's been real.
It has been.
Yeah. Time for a beer.
It's time. I'm gonna hit stop.